Some of you stayed around for the first panel, that's great. Some of you will join us fresh for this. So I will just say a couple opening remarks and not repeat everything. This house is built by the Hub Culture. It is in fact, as you will see from the Hub Culture logo, it really reflects a centerpiece in the center, which is convening. It has these U.S. steel built elements around that, and it has the sky and the earth. So all of this is central. It was put up last week. It was built in 2 days, I think. 2 days at night. 9 days. It was for those who are in the permitting business, permitted at the end of October. But it took 9 days to build it, and it will take probably fewer days to take it down in the next week or so. And it will move somewhere else in the world. One of the places we've talked about, not committed to, is the Papal Summer Villa, 145 acres outside of Rome, where the Pope is committed to make it a place that exemplifies sustainability. Because he says, why should I be taking a summer in the villa when the people of Rome don't have a villa? So, I want to make this something that people can see, not just Pope. And so one of the interesting places that I'd love to have Stan take this building is to this Papal Summer Villa outside Rome. And that's, anyway. So my name is George Vredenberg. I'm the executive chairman of the Davos Alzheimer's Collaborative. The Davos Alzheimer's Collaborative started with Alzheimer's, as you can tell by the title, here at WEF in 2021. And basically as a result of an invitation by Klaus Schwab to create a global mechanism like we've done with Seppi and Davi on infectious diseases, but on brain disorders. Because he thought these brain disorders were now a large problem in terms of prevalence, mortality, and cost as infectious disease. And he thought that we ought to be doing something in the brain disorder space. So that's how it started. But what we've learned I'm a patient advocate. I've lost 3 generations of my family to Alzheimer's. So I started with a passion for Alzheimer's. But I found out over the last several years that in fact Alzheimer's is the product of brain problems that occur, or brain resilience that occur during the entire life. So we have now expanded to brain health across the lifespan. And one of our key missions is to link the global north and the global south. So you'll see future panels on what we're doing in Africa and how we can bring innovations that are occurring in the global north to the south, and innovations that will be forced on the world by the global south, which needs lower cost diagnostics, lower cost interventions, lower cost treatments than we could afford in the north. And quite frankly, a lot of people in the north can't afford what we're putting out in this space anyway. So in any event, you will learn from this panel. The first panel was describing sort of the problem, I don't mean to call it the problem, the challenge in front of us in terms of how to deal with brain health during the course of your life. And this panel is going to focus on one of the solution systems that we need to figure out how to use to get at it. That's investment and innovation. So we're going to hear from Rob Kaplan of Goldman Sachs. We're going to hear from Daniel Kraft from Silicon Valley, and others who are going to speak to the issue of investment and innovation in this space. A lot is happening. Investment is going to it, coming to it. Innovation is massively moving toward it with all the new developments in AI and other neuromodulation techniques, and the ability to actually affect your brain waves in the course of your life in different ways. So we're going to hear a lot about innovation in this space. So I'm going to introduce Peter Van, who is the editorial, excuse me, I'll get his title corrected before I embarrass him, the editorial director for leadership at Fortune magazine. And he will introduce the panel and himself. Peter, thank you for doing this.
Thank you so much. This is going to be one of the most amazing places I've ever been. Thank you, George, for that introduction. And just like God, he vanishes. which is very appropriate in this space. You mentioned the Pope. I do feel sort of like there is this old Roman sort of, building built for gods. And I suppose our gods use steel tonight.
You see God up there, Peter down here, and what else do you do?
You've been here for many years, I've been here for many years, and so let's appreciate this place also, right? This amazing place that we're gathering at. And, I want to invite you all for a panel for the next, this is going to be incredible. If we make it to 6 p.m., all alive and well, all these panels like this. So let's try and do that. For those of you, by the way, who are standing, there may still be a few spots free. If you want to do it sort of the folksy way and sit down on the floor, feel free to do that. But remember, we're in a small space. I'm glad COVID is over. Is COVID over? Because otherwise this would definitely be a super spreader event. But we're here to talk in the next 1 hour and a half or so about fueling brain health. And specifically, as George said, investment in innovation imperative. We've got a great set of speakers, and I'm very happy that the first one is Rob Kaplan. Rob, I don't know if you can see me, or I also sound to you like the voice of God. Thank you. You look great too, and that's not a coincidence because Rob, who as you know is vice chair of Goldman Sachs, among other accolades. He and I, we had a short exchange before coming on stage today. We said, we don't know anymore what the Davos dress code is like nowadays. And nobody knows. And the question was, should we wear a tie or no tie? And I said, I'm not sure, I don't think so. But then we agreed, you know what, if you wear a tie, I'll wear a tie. So Rob, you look great tie. Well done. On to more serious business. And by the way, to the other panels, I hope you're okay standing for a few more minutes. Then we'll give you the stage to talk about brain health from your perspective. We'll start with Rob. If it's okay, Rob, then I'm going to sit down in this comfortable chair. and Rob, I think for a lot of people, when they hear your name and they hear the title, Vice Chairman of Goldman Sachs, they might assume that when you're here to talk about brain health and fueling brain health, that you're going to tell us how we can finance all of this. And I see you nodding in the opposite direction of yes, which means that that's not really what you think is the key driver today, or the key change maker of brain health. And now, we can see you appear to us as a giant. So we can see your every eye movement. So I said a lot of things, some of which you agree with and some of which not. So let me ask you a simple question. What do you think is going to make a change, a big change, towards having better brain health? Is it going to be coming more from the finance side, we may need more money, or is it going to come more from the innovation side and the collaboration side?
So the answer is yes to all those sides. I've been a business person for most of my adult life and a leadership professor, but since approximately the year 2000, I've been involved in first neurodegenerative disease research narrowly through ALS and more broadly. I co-chair the Harvard Center for Neurodegeneration and Repair, and I've worked and written cases as a leadership professor on a whole range of medical research organizations. However, the reason I say all of the above, there's an ecosystem for medical research. I've spent most of my life in the early part of the ecosystem. So there is a need for research on scientific phenomena, trying to understand gene therapy, disease better. It tends to be done in academia. Sometimes it leads to a compound. If that compound has promise, then there's a partnership, usually with a biotech, and the biotech will take it from there. And if that goes well and moves along, that biotech will either get it to the finish line or more likely will need to merge with a big pharma company so they can get FDA approval. My life has been spent in the most speculative early part. So there's a need For later stage investment in biotech and beyond, the investment I work on tends to be the investment that doesn't yield a return. It's going to be written off, most of it, and that is, again, scientific phenomena, maybe early stage theories on compounds. It tends to get clinician researchers working with pure PhD researchers to try to do these projects, but that's sort of the work in progress that is needed, and some of that then leads to more fruitful areas for biotech and beyond. So I'm interested in that early stage investment, which is often philanthropic. I used to say philanthropic in the NIH, in governments, but I think in the world we're heading into, we probably need to be less reliant on governments. It's going to need to be philanthropic. And a lot of my philanthropic backing in this area has been this early, more speculative stage that tends to be done in academia and by academics.
Excellent. And I want to double click on that, to use a modern term, I suppose. And ask you a little bit more about that early stage, that academic research. But since you mentioned it, almost in passing, you said, going forward, we'll see less government getting involved. And you mentioned the word NIH. And so, being less than 24 hours, I suppose, after the inauguration of the new Trump administration, and of course, the new head of these institutions, is this why you say that, or is it just a general trend that there's less government reliance?
Well, I think it's general trends. I think those trends will be accelerated with the new U.S. administration, there's no doubt. I think many of the scientific grants, I would guess, the budget of the NIH may be curtailed. But through most of my work in the last 25 years, a lot of the very fruitful academic research is so speculative, even the NIH might not fund it. And it's very, very critical, but it requires, normally it's funded either by an academic institution, or more likely it's a researcher that will appeal to someone who I have a family member who had Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or MS or ALS, and I want to do something, and much of that motivation can often lead to giving to a early stage researcher who then does work to better understand that disease.
Right. Now, you mentioned that you believe that one of the critical parts is that early stage research, that academic research, where, and I think we all know this, most people in the crowd know this, that is indeed, what would you say, 90%? What's the percentage that sort of, goes lost in terms of eventual application down the line? What's your success or failure?
This is a guess. I would guess 90% plus is ultimately written off, or it's not ever meant to create a return, but out of that work, the nuggets develop that ultimately do go to the next stage. And as great as pharma and biotech are, they don't really have the money to do that early stage because they've got to have more of a for-profit focus. And the stage I'm talking about that I've been involved with tends to realize up front, this is unlikely. We hope it leads to something, but we're prepared that it won't.
Right, and I know that one of the organizations you're involved with does exactly that. It funds this kind of academic research. And so just to give us an idea of the scale, right? It's a nonprofit. So your own organization, is that right? Is it somewhere in the area of 70 million that is invested?
So let's go through a couple. One is, I started in 2000 with something called Project ALS, and I'm still chairman of it, Lou Gehrig's disease, and partnered with two sisters, where a woman named Jennifer Estes had ALS, and her sisters and I joined them, and a large group of people helped start a research organization, literally 25 years ago, and we've cumulatively raised $70 million, but what we've tried to do is better understand why people recreate the virus of ALS in a lab at Columbia University, help support compound development at both Harvard and Columbia, and in some cases, work with biotechs to see if we can further a compound.
So, help us put that amount into perspective, because, I think sorry to do this, I'm a journalist. I think one of the ways you can put it in perspective is that it's about the pay package of your CEO for the next year.
Yeah, I know. So let's talk through it. It might surprise people if I gave $500,000 or $1 million to an Alzheimer's researcher, or a Parkinson's researcher, or an MS researcher, or others. That can be a very significant investment that can fuel their lab and certainly allow them to do a project. What happens is when something leads to a compound out of that early stage, so the money proportion is smaller. As you get later in biotech and then pharma, you're talking hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to ultimately get a drug approved by the FDA. We're not focused on that. So the proportion of money spent on the early stage might be smaller, but the reason it's smaller is you're not going to have any profit, and it's very speculative.
Now, the reason why I mentioned this money amount is because I'm trying to understand, of course, we're talking about both the investment imperative and the innovation imperative. And so you've mentioned that you've funneled $70 million of fuel, I don't know which one you use, in the last 25 years. It seems like you're saying, that's actually able to generate quite a lot of research, basic research, into these fields, because these labs, that's quite a lot of money for them. And so the funding part, does that mean the funding part is not the problem here? There's enough money at that early stage?
So I think what it tells you is that ALS is still an orphan disease, and the science I've written cases on this, it's very, very challenging. I've also been co-chair of the Harvard Center for Neurodegeneration and Repair, which focuses on Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, MS, and a broader range. That may have raised cumulatively hundreds of millions of dollars, but even then, we still don't have a treatment yet or a blood marker for Alzheimer's. I think we will. And so, no, I think I will always tell you, if we raise more money in this early stage, it will be better. Having said that, two key things I've mentioned to you before we've worked on. You want to have it scientifically reviewed if you're going to give a grant. And I think the other thing we've tried to do at Harvard Center for Neurodegeneration and Project ALS is make the grant subject to collaboration.
Right.
The natural culture in academia tends to be more independent work. Collaboration is not necessarily what a PhD researcher aspires to do. They aspire to do a project, get data, publish a study, have it in an academic journal, then get tenure. It does not necessarily naturally lead to collaboration. So my belief is investors, outsiders, need to make collaboration a condition of their grants, and I've seen where that's done. Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, who I've done a lot of work with also, is an example of that. I think insisting on collaboration, it will help because there's limited dollars and the science is extremely difficult.
So, let's pause on that for a little bit, because, for you this is a fundamental point, isn't it? That, even if you get huge amounts of money, or all the amount of money that's needed or that's requested at all kinds of academic institutions, you're saying it's unlikely to lead to the best outcomes quickest, because the nature of academia is fundamentally one where there is not an incentive for collaboration. So I know you've said it already, but could you just repeat that again and make us understand, really what the issue is here?
So there are 1,000. I'll give you there are 1,000 neurodegenerative disease researchers in the Harvard community. That's probably over, let's say, 10 hospitals. They tend to be affiliated with Harvard Medical School. Among those thousands, a portion will be PhDs and clinicians, meaning somebody who's disease focused but also has got a PhD and does research and sees patients, and then a portion of them will be pure PhDs. They tend to work independently, so you might have 5 similar experiments going on in that community, And actually, the 5 different experimenters may not even be aware that the experiment's going on within a 5-mile radius of where they're doing the work. And so what a number of donors have done, and I've been one of them that's helped lead this, let's try to insist on more collaboration, so we do 1 or 2 experiments, not 5 duplicative experiments. And second, let's share the results. So if someone researcher in that community can better build on what that first researcher learned. Now this seems basic, and as a business person it seems obvious, but it's not, it doesn't tend to be the natural culture of academia, and this is where maybe business expertise or business collaborative practices can help in this area of research.
So maybe in closing, Robin, I want to see if I can get one question from the audience, and then we'll move to the our panelists who are patiently waiting in the side wings. So, tell us what that then actually looks like. If you do those conditional grants, I mean, is it just about writing in the contract? You got to collaborate. I mean, like, is it as simple as that? What is the practical mechanism to make this work?
So my advice for those of you in this audience, and there are many that are thinking about giving this, one, yes, make it subject to collaboration, but the second piece of advice is this is not a short-term. I've been involved for 25 years. I plan to be involved for the rest of my life. The science of neurodegeneration and brain health is very complicated. Despite all the work, it's still not that well understood. Lou Gehrig had ALS in the 1930s. We still haven't made that much progress. And so I'd say take a long-term perspective. Make your grants subject to collaboration, ideally, and have back that researcher, that group of researchers, year in and year out, because it will take likely years, decades to see results. And so have a realistic time frame on your thinking.
Thank you. I want to see if there's time for one question from the audience over there. Do we have a microphone, or you'll just have to speak up? Tell us who you are, and then briefly your question. I'll try to repeat for the camera.
Okay, great. Sure. My name is Bill Preston.
Here comes a mic.
Oh, there is a mic. Okay, so you'll have to repeat, Bill.
Great, thank you.
Sorry about that.
My name's Bill Preston.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go. Thank you. Thank you for being involved in this discussion. It's very personal to me. I lost my mother and uncle who were World War II veterans to Alzheimer's. The Rosa Parks organization in Detroit, I do work with. Mrs. Parks had Alzheimer's. So I'd like to share that because many people are not aware Mrs. Parks had it, and we need to have this discussion amongst women, which is why I work. Maya love Rosa Parks, but nonetheless, I've been working with a startup biotech company. I come from Big Pharma, Merck and Allergan, but the problem is I'm working with a startup. We have proof of concept. Findings have been validated by Dr. Elisa Masilia, one of the leading neuroscience folks when he was at UC San Diego, at NIH. We have been stuck in the valley trying to get the funds to begin phase 1 studies. It's been frustrating. I literally even went to Africa, South Africa, to meet with the biggest pharmaceutical company. All Big Pharma always tells us, get through phase 1, we'll give you all the money you need.
Right.
Even leaving healthcare departments. But the thing is, when companies are stuck in that valley as a startup,
Yes.
it's so frustrating when you have something that's been validated by such a well-known person like Dr. Masalia, but you can't get funding. So I know you're saying early stages, but when you've already established proof of concept.
So let me talk about this. So
Thank you.
I spend a lot of my time, thank you for your question. It's an excellent, I can't tell you how many biotechs I talk to in different areas who are exactly what you just described. I just need $5 million more dollars. I just need $10 million more dollars. The pharma is not yet ready because they want you to get further, but the biotech these are usually $5 or $10 million short. Sometimes I put together a group to back that biotech, but there's only a limited, you can't do it indefinitely. And I do think that there's, this is a reality, and what you're describing is not unusual, it's typical. And I would say there's room for big institutions, nonprofits, private funders like us in this room to identify those type of nonprofits and get them over the hump. And my experience is they may say, I need 10 million, but we whittle it down. Maybe we can figure out a way to bare bones if you get 4 million, and let's get to this next phase, and then you can cooperate with a pharma company. But I'd say there's a big gap for companies that are stuck, and I talk to one of them, seems like every few weeks, this is same conversation. And maybe if there were $100 million pool somewhere, again, it may not make a return, it may have to be philanthropic, but it could make a big impact. But I'm talking, I bet this company you're referring to probably just needs $3 to $5 million, not 20. Although I don't know the facts, but that's...
You're getting a nod, Rob.
Right. Well, you know,
Yeah.
so I'll tell you, I'll buy you a plane ticket to come see us at La Jolla. You're gonna have a magical experience by the sea at La Jolla Cove and a wonderful lunch right there in La Jolla Cove. So I'm going to take the money out of my 401k. The guy will say, you'll be impressed with our data. I guarantee you.
Thank you. That's great, and you can buy me a ticket too if you want to. Thank you so much for that question. I'm seeing a desperate look at here. Do you want to say something or ask something, because we do have to move on to the next, very briefly. Do you have a question?
I just want to let him know that we have some data for ALS on the small molecule. It's old, but I've redesigned it to a newer structure. We can talk about it.
Contact me.
Okay.
Great. Thank you so much. You can give the mic back over there. So listen, Rob, there's so much more to talk about, and we are very grateful to have had this time with
Thank you.
And thank you for having joined us from, where are you in Texas now, or where are you joining us from?
I'm in Tallahassee, Florida, believe it or not,
Wow.
for business meeting, but I'm very pleased. Thank you for letting me join this way. Next year I'll come in person.
That's excellent. Thank you so much. And even though you can't maybe hear it, we're going to give you a big round of applause. Thank you, Rob, for joining us. Rob, I suppose disappear. You can stay with us if you like, Rob, but otherwise, there we go. We can now see Connor. What a good-looking young man that is. I want to turn to the next panelist that we have here. And by the way, you're going to hear first individually from each panelist. We're going to have these mini discussions, and some of the panelists will have a short presentation. I don't know how about you guys, but I've never had this 2-hour session at Davos, including presentations. But I have to say, very impressive start. I love how everyone is very motivated to learn, to listen. And we're going to continue that with our next speaker. I'm from Europe, so it's always hard for me to know when you have to sort of use the shorthand for a name in the US and when you have to longhand. Daniel told me it is Daniel. Daniel Kraft is our next speaker. He's the founder of NextMed Health. I hope I got that right. And Daniel, you were introduced earlier on as the man from Silicon Valley. Which makes me surprised that you're not in DC right now. But you're going to speak, I suppose, a little bit more about the technology side of things. We're eager to hear your presentation, and since you're from Silicon Valley, I'm confident that this is going to be, as they call, an elevator pitch, and then we'll ask you some questions. Welcome to you, Daniel.
Thank you very much. All right, real honor, pleasure to be here. I come from the future, Silicon Valley, not DC, which is maybe not the future. But I was inspired to be my very first Davos. So I did a little art this morning about the future of the brain health in Davos. Of course,
Amazing.
I'm cheating like everybody else. We're all using ChatGPT and OpenAI, and of course now you can do videos from text. They're still a little bit non-perfect yet. Let's see if you can see the problems with some of these technologies. So it's still early. I mean, only 2 years into the GPT revolution. It's moving very, very quickly. And in my field as a physician scientist, we already know these tools can do a much better job than most of us at passing the medical boards, or maybe making a diagnosis of early dementia or other neurologic issues. We are going to Dr. GPT to find solutions when our clinicians miss the boat, or to have digital empathy, or we're seeing this massive change which is going to impact almost every element of health and biomedicine. And it's moving faster than our brains can keep up, our social, our regulatory. So it's a really interesting age to leverage these new tools, even though they still have some challenges, even in the early days. And one of the challenges for our brains, there's a famous quote from Sam Altman that GPT is like an e-bike for your mind, but my comment is, what if your kids never learn how to ride a regular bike, or never develop their own biking muscles, or a medical student never develops a differential diagnosis by themselves? So interesting times, but I'm an optimist like many of you. I think we're not going to have generative AI, but generative health. We'll have a new era where our interfaces will interface with us based on our age, our culture, our language, our personality type, and will lead to this new era of really engaged, democratized healthcare around the planet. This agentic health is going to come to brain health and beyond. And so hopefully writ large, the future of health medicine and the brain is going to be much more intelligent, much more crowdsourced, much more data-driven, and much more democratized around the health of the planet. And our mission, I think, here at Brain House is to move us from where we are now, intermittent reactive sort of sick care models, to a future that's continuous, proactive, anytime, anywhere, across the whole healthcare continuum, of course, of which the brain is such a key part. So of course, AI is only part of that. Many technologies are moving very, very quickly. And I think the thing to think about here as we have this amazing 4 days is to think about this convergence, this super convergence. As things get faster, cheaper, smaller, better, that's creating entire new fields and technologies that didn't invest and even exist when I was a Stanford medical student 20-something years ago, from brain-computer interfaces to gene editing. And speaking of BCI, that's moving quickly. I saw Tom Apsley here from Synchron. That's a great example of the super convergence of technologies that are almost magical in their capabilities, from now interfacing in the realm of biohybrid. So our charge here is to reimagine brain health, not just today, but into the next decade moving forward. And in the investment perspective, I have a small venture fund. I think half of our investments actually touch on the future of the brain and mental health in interesting ways. So those are investing. It's a great time. So we're not just thinking about the sick care side. We want to think about health span, longevity, particularly for the brain. So we don't want just long life, but quality of life years. This is my 105-year-old grandmother-in-law. She's still doing quite well. But part of her long, healthy life, including her brain health, is her social determinants. They're the social determinants of aging, how her brain has been interacting with her environment. So while technology is great, we have to remember that our social determinants are often critical. Okay, so what's the future of health and medicine? I wrote an article for NetGeo a few years ago. And it's not about any one technology, it's how we bring them all together, but also not just the technology, but understanding incentives. We don't practice evidence-based medicine, we practice reimbursement-based medicine. And right now that's often on the sick care side of the equation. If we can spend more time on proactive brain health and other health, that will move a lot of needles, and many of you are in the finance space. So think about the incentives. Also think about super convergence. I've been in the chair of medicine at Singular University. I run a program called Next Med Health. The theme is bringing folks from all sorts of fields together, from psychedelics to checkbots to drones to nanotech, to rethink and reimagine the health of the future of medicine. Come join us in December. Hopefully we can bring the Brain House there to do that together. Okay, let's look at a few things that are moving quickly on the exponential and how they apply to the brain and beyond. One of them, of course, is the genome. 10 years ago, the price of sequencing a genome was maybe $10,000. Today, it's about $10 or $100, on its way to $10. That means we can leverage our genomics and our pharmacogenomics to understand our risk for dementia, mental health challenges, or to pick the right drug, whether it's for depression or anxiety or beyond. We're starting to see the ability to connect the dots between the lab and the clinic. It's, no medical student can remember their genetics. We need to have smart user interfaces and workflows. We're understanding many diseases at their genetic levels, not just type 2 diabetes or Alzheimer's or autism. We can start to understand them at their genomic level and pull those together in much more impactful ways. And now we can not only read DNA, we're starting to write DNA. We're in the era of synthetic biology, CRISPR-based therapies, for example, for sickle cell, or as the Nobel Prize now for protein design. So the next decade we'll see the ability to create personalized vaccines for not just my world of oncology, but for Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and beyond. So incredible era to pull those things together. And so don't just think about the genome, we're in the era of measuring the exposome, the proteome, the sociome, the microbiome. All of those play a key role in our integrated health. And speaking of the proteome, recent data shows from UK Biobank that you can predict diseases like Parkinson's sometimes 6 or more years early from just blood tests. So think about this multimodal era of health. Again, it's not any one form of data, but how you match them up, how we can make sense of our own sort of digital twins for our brain health, for our neurologic health, for our heart health. And I think we're going to see that really catalyze the future of health, mental health, and beyond around the planet. We can bring that multi-model balance together. So, the world's moving quickly, often exponentially. You all remember Moore's Law. That's dematerializing and digitizing many elements of our health and medicine. What used to be physical is now, of course, digital. That's disappearing into our contact lenses, our Apple Vision Pros. It's coming to our age of avatars, where we can interact with these as mental health coaches or as colleagues. We can design almost anything to be an avatar. I can turn myself into an avatar. The sound's not working, but Virtual Daniel. I just typed that out, it speaks. So
nice.
That's kind of fun. So now we're also blending that with augmented virtual and spatial computing, right? These technologies will soon be in our Meta glasses, for better or for worse, but we can use those tools in the operating room or to bring that information to children to understand about their own health and augment their visibility. We can not just see you of today in the mirror, but maybe how you're doing if you're doing your working out, or you of tomorrow if you're having donuts for breakfast every morning. So you of today, you of tomorrow. Here's me now, here's me 100 Dunkin' Donuts later. Or if you have someone or a friend or colleague who smokes, before smoking, after smoking. That can be powerful for behavior change, the hardest thing to do, or if you spend too much time on social media, which some of us do. So these are new kind of new tools to augment our health. Then there's virtual reality. It's really fun to put Graham on a roller coaster, but virtual reality is becoming a mental health tool, right? It's helping all sorts of folks in many different ways, from folks with dementia to older folks that travel the world. It's becoming a tool for treating pain as a therapeutic. It's augmenting our gamifying physical therapy. Some of you gone into trip and do a virtual psychedelic journey for meditation in these platforms. There's platforms like this giving you a virtual psychologist that can show up almost anywhere. So new modalities to bring therapists to you using GPT and beyond are going to be more and more powerful. We recently funded a company that's doing video games for mental health. So sneaking in the video game element to a mental health, to a video game platform, which is now FDA cleared, could be part of our gamification of healthcare going forward. What about diagnostics? We, of course, want to pick up diseases early rather than late stage 0, not stage 2 or 3. Now, using our FaceOhm, for example, we have these new tools where you don't need to be wearing anything, but you can put your vital signs up from your phone, and not just blood pressure, but maybe even your hemoglobin A1C, and your eye tremor or hand tremor. We have the founder here of My Health, looking at eye tracking, can predict everything from your outcome from a concussion or to having early forms of cognitive disabilities. Your voice, as you might know, is a biomarker. Oh, stand over here. Your voice is a biomarker for everything from mental health challenges, early signs of Parkinson's or ALS, or the sound of your cough, is that croup or COVID or something more dangerous. Your voice can even pick up and detect where you might have high blood sugar. So metabolic health is very much tied to brain health. And of course now you can do that with over-the-counter CGMs and start to hyper-personalize our diets. My friend Dean Ornish wanted to make sure I shared the fact that modifying your diet, your exercise, your lifestyle can start to even reverse early forms of Alzheimer's. So think about the common things. You don't need fancy drugs for many of these elements of the future of the brain. And then there's wearables. Our wearables and wearables can now detect and measure almost every element of our physiology, our behavior. They're going well beyond the wrist. The Fitbit was launched 15 years ago. One way we'll have a Fitbit for the brain. These sort of wearables are now starting to measure blood pressure and blood sugar without any other intervention. And that will be important to our brain health as we going forward. So that's going to be interesting if we live stream our digital biomarkers. There are now patches bringing hospital to home. All this sort of data that used to require a hospital or clinical trial in a setting can be democratized around the planet. Hearables, a great space to augment your brain, to give you augmented information. Electroceuticals, ringables, I'm sure many of you have an Oura ring or something like that. That can start to track your sleep, which you're not getting a lot of here in Davos. That's one of the most optimal things for your brain going forward, and new technologies for maximizing sleep. So think about small data. It doesn't need to be a fancy wearable. You can see from someone's steps if they're doing better after being discharged from a surgery before or not doing so well. Mobility is one of the new vital signs that's very much related to our cognitive health, and there are new ways to measure our mobility with simple cameras, and maybe soon be able to augment our ability to mobilize after a stroke using the next generation of exoskeletons. Speaking of the brain, here's my brain color-coded with a little bit of help of AI. The imaging is getting faster and cheaper. You can go get a full-body MRI today for maybe $2,000 read by an radiologist. The MRI machines are getting smaller, more portable. I had my brain MRI on a boat going down the river, plugged into wall power. So really amazing new ways to democratize imaging for the brain and brain health. So in 5 or 10 years, you might go to your corner pharmacy, get your full-body scan done, read by the AI radiologist to be proactive about all forms of health. And some of these are even wearable devices that can replace an MRI to pick up stroke and other neurologic conditions. So big picture, these new sorts of digital tools can bring a digital diagnostic tool set to us anywhere on the planet. You might have seen the AI-powered ultrasounds, so democratizing diagnostics to the global south, anywhere in the world. For democratizing tests, I helped lead an XPRIZE initiative on a rapid COVID testing initiative. Those sorts of home-based tests can be impactful for infectious disease, neurocognitive diseases, and beyond. And big picture, as we pull those together, we can really just start to democratize health and wellness around the planet. Recently helped Andrew Ng build a company in India, which is bringing sort of the AI doctor and neurologist to the bottom billion in India, and overall to democratize care around the planet. Finally, of course, this is all integrated with artificial intelligence, or IA, intelligence augmentation, right? You can look back at the retina and pick up neurological diseases, or stroke risks, or cardiac risks. It's blending with physical AI, right? The next generation of robots, hopefully it'll be fun and cuddly. But some of them are going to be social. I just saw one of these this morning where you can start to interact with social robots, and they're going to play a role in our cognitive health and folks who have loneliness and beyond. So these are not going to replace humans, nurses, psychiatrists, psychologists. They're going to hopefully augment us, and we know we have a shortage of them around the planet. So how does this all come together? You've heard of digital health, connected health, mobile health. We're starting to prescribe apps instead of drugs and solutions. So digital therapeutics for things like smoking cessation and addiction, mental health platforms bridging psychologists and virtual mental health care, video games that are FDA cleared to treat kids with ADHD, a whole new sort of ways to connect the dots to be proactive for diagnostics, therapy, and beyond. And so what that's going to give us is a new era of the personal check engine life. You're going to know you have a disease before you have it, and that's going to be integrated in sort of minority report of the near future age for brain health and beyond. So what can we do today? There are already thousands of applications in digital health that might be applicable for mental health. I've got a platform called digital.health, and I was just looking through it today to see what's in there, for example, related to Alzheimer's. And there's dozens of digital health solutions already out there, from Cognito to Molecular U to LV. Some of us are familiar with the company ReadySpec, which is, for example, having a platform to take a picture of the back of the eye and do very early forms of dementia diagnosis, so picking up, again, disease at stage 0. Whole slews of solutions already there, so don't always start a new company, but you find some of the solutions that are there for behavioral therapy and beyond. Whole new era of digital health. So all this data from our Internet of Things homes, just siloed information, is still a huge challenge. I think a charge for all of us here is not to think about big data, but how do we move from big data to actionable knowledge and insights and narrow the gap between bringing that to the bedside or the website. I think that's a big thing that the Brain Health Initiative can do. And thinking about the future of our health as almost a Waze-ification. How do we build like Google Maps or Waze for health, so we're all sharing our healthcare journeys, whether it's for ALS or schizophrenia, to understand the journeys for all of us. Self-driving cars are their part. So as a close, how are we going to practice this differently? We're now in the era of digital care, physical versus virtual. The big picture is we're going to move writ large from intermittent and reactive sick care, where we kind of collect data in the silos of our clinics, and leads to our reactive mindset, waiting for a heart attack, the stroke, the cancer to arrive, to a future that's continuous, proactive, anytime, anywhere, hopefully much less expensive and more democratized around the planet. There's many platforms that are starting to do that, from the robots of the world, that will really become your agentic intelligence sources. So as we think of this future of entering the metaverse, it's a time for us to all reimagine this AI and digitally enabled future of healthcare and brain health. It's not about any one technology you want to think about, but how they're coming together, this exponential, this super convergence. It gives us an incredible opportunity, not just to think about what's possible in 2025, which is the future, but if you like Wayne Gretzky and skate to where the puck is going to be for 2030 and 2035. And if we have that mindset, we can go from now to next in brain health around the planet and not take incremental steps, but exponential steps. It's our opportunity here in this amazing room with colleagues and collaborators, not just predict that future, but to boldly create it for brain health around the planet. So that's a short teaser. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Daniel, I would say take a seat and somebody give that man a glass of water. But take a seat. Daniel, so a couple of things, I suppose. And the first question is where to begin? You know, people sometimes ask me to moderate panels and they say, you know, Peter, you're a great moderator, but you talk a bit slowly. And I feel like what we're seeing here play out is sort of like the modern rendering of that old Disney movie of like the turtle versus the hare. Does anyone here listen to podcasts at 2 times the speed? I don't. So I'm completely overwhelmed, Daniel. But I want to ask you, because we're here to talk about brain health and how to get to innovation on brain health and to fuel brain health innovation. And so we've heard a lot of innovations. So it seems to me, correct me if I'm wrong, that there's no lack of innovations. Tell us from your point of view, what is some of the most promising progress that you see coming out of, you know, let's call it Silicon Valley for convenience, when it comes to brain health and focusing perhaps on those diseases that are the focus of this house, such as Alzheimer's, ALS, Parkinson's, and so on?
I mean, part of the most exciting thing is to see new folks entering the space. A lot of tech folks have challenges in their own lives, and others have started to fund companies and catalyze this sort of super convergence. And I apologize for going so fast. There's just so much happening. I think we need to make sure we have a bit of a broad view and don't get in our old-fashioned silos. I think one of the most exciting things that's happening is the sort of digitalization of clinical trials. They used to only have a limited subset. Now we can reach people almost anywhere. We can detect those diseases earlier. You can measure a lot about someone's cognitive health from how they're managing their smartphone, for example. And so I think one of the most exciting areas is to get folks engaged, and new empowered, engaged patient or consumer is the new drug. They can hopefully now do self-health. You can go to your own labs, you can do your own MRI. Your AI can start to interpret it for you, and you can find a clinical trial and enter it early and build that sort of Google Maps in ways and not think in the old sort of old school siloed, only have to go to Stanford or Harvard or beyond to get those studies launched and built. So democratizing the collection of data and the trials and speeding up the knowledge of what might work. And then, as I mentioned briefly, to understand diseases more at their multi-omic level, not the sort of black boxes.
Right. Now, let's take that, and that's very practical advice, right? Like this is for individuals. Through the help of digital health, they'll be able to get to the clinical trials that are most beneficial to them, even when they don't have normal access to places like Harvard or other hubs of these trials. So now bring it back to the big question. We heard earlier on from Rob about sort of like the gap in the academic research and the frustration that comes from that, from having these diseases that have been around for obviously a very long time and that we still don't have a solution for. What are the most promising technologies, innovations that can actually make a difference on these diseases that have been so elusive in terms of finding a solution for them?
Well, part of it is now this new era of AI-enabled drug discovery. So the ability now it's moving relatively quickly to find a target or new targets using multiomics, design a drug maybe from scratch, or to survey often repurposing drugs that are FDA cleared for rare diseases, and to match them and then to do virtual clinical trial so they don't fail when they get to humans, and then to make those clinical trials more seamless. And then also measuring different things. The old school way of measuring, let's say a brain tumor is the size of a tumor. Now we have these new digital biomarkers to kind of expand the art of the possible for what might be approved as a therapy. Sometimes it's a meditation app, right? All these new ways of engaging everyone from home-based EEGs to your smart devices that engage your own brain and bring those things together. I think so. It's kind of again that super convergence part. So,
is there anything from your point of view, from where you're addressing this big elephant that is sort of improving brain health, that's lacking for you? Because you seem to have all these amazing solutions and access to all these amazing technologies, but on the other side of the equation, it doesn't really seem, I mean, to my knowledge at least, that a lot has really come out of it yet.
Well, the bigger challenge, I mean, in healthcare, many healthcare systems in the United States, most of it's broken, is the misaligned incentives. You know, the neurologist isn't initially incentivized to try a new wearable device that might track a tremor or help manage a dopaminergic-related drug. The workflows aren't necessarily there. So it's not about the technology, but integrating into the incentives and the workflows and the payment models, whether it's the NHS or a Kaiser or a VA, where many are sick care focused and sort of want to only pay for disease. So aligning technology, innovation, workflow, regulatory reimbursement is that sort of the hard nut to crack. Many of the innovations are amazing. Getting through the regulatory steps is hard, but getting the next generation of clinicians, mental health workers, psychologists, nurses, psychiatrists, to see what's already here and build their future mental health, neurologic, brain health platforms using them in mind, I think is a critical part.
Excellent. We'll have some of them here tonight, and I'm sure there's some in the audience, so I want to make sure there's some space for you to connect with them and them with you. Before we do, though, we're going to give space to the next speaker. Just for convenience, I'll ask you to step back into the shadows over there, and you'll come back. You're not done with us yet. But I'd like to ask now Jochen Reiser, the president of the University of Texas Medical Branch, to tell us your side of the equation. And Jochen, what can I tell you?
I'm going to speak a lot slower.
That was going to be my question. But please tell us from your point of view, and I think this is, we've heard the technology point of view. Tell us now the academic point of view. I think I suppose this is your medical center.
Actually, there are 2 slides missing, which is actually great because now I can adjust some of my thoughts from what I just heard. And I really want to thank the first 2 speakers because they both brought very critical elements to a university. So I'm a university president now and the CEO of a health system. And I'll come to that slide in a second. But I grew up in the Black Forest, Germany, right? 1,000 people. And then I made my way to the US to multiple institutions. I was at Harvard, University of Miami, Chicago, and now Texas. And at each institution, I missed certain elements. It's almost like I have the fork, but I don't have the knife. I have the spoon, but I don't have the glass that I need to drink. And I said to myself, maybe one day when I'm ever in a position that I can lead a university, I'm going to try and bring all of this under the ecosystem of a university.
Jochen, I'm going to interrupt you right there. I don't know if everyone can hear us, but I think it will help for the people following online if you try to keep the mic closer to your mouth. Yes.
Okay, so that was my idea. And with that in mind, I want to present to you just in a few minutes how the University of Texas and the ecosystem of Texas is actually structured. What you see here is not the University of Texas, it's the Texas Medical Center. So just so that you know, this is the largest medical and science complex in the world. More than 60 institutions are working together since 1945. We also have an ecosystem of innovation. There are great universities in there, such as the University of Texas, also Rice University, which is here in the room, and many others. And we are trying to innovate and work together in this massive complex. And let me tell you, it's challenging. You would think that it's easy because everybody's next to each other. Let me tell you, it's not. And if you look at the University of Texas system, this is the largest educational system in all of Texas. And I'm still getting shocked when I see this because it's double the size of Germany, essentially, and a multiple of Switzerland. And so we have 14 institutions in the University of Texas. 5 are healthcare related, such as MD Anderson, you might know, UT Southwestern, or UTMB, the one that I lead with my team, which is the oldest university west of the Mississippi in the healthcare sector. It has an enormous impact on the education of the next generations. We at UTMB, I think I aged since that picture actually, when I'm seeing that now. We have
Daniel can help you with that, I think.
Sorry about that. We are here since 1891. Oldest medical institution west of the Mississippi, oldest nursing school. I'm saying this only because I want you to imagine what is important for a place like that. If we continue just as we always do, we provide health care, we make nurses good nurses, doctors good doctors. I don't think we stay relevant as a university. I mean, this is the beginning of Texas medicine. We got to do something different. So I come back to my initial experiences where I say, where's the fork, where's the knife, where's the class? And do we really have all missions, which is education, research, innovation, and clinical care on one campus? And that's what we have been trying to do. And so how do we socialize this? Well, we go back to what we already do. We have a Center for Polar Medical Operations. We have the oldest aerospace medicine program in the United States. We work with SpaceX, NASA. We have the Galveston National Lab. That's a biosafety level 4 facility. There are only 2 in the United States. One is at BU, at Boston University, and this is the larger one. It's actually in Galveston. And this has some of the most dangerous pathogens in the world are in this building. And we have pioneered telemedicine, not because we just wanted to do that, because we are also running the state prison health system for 82% of state prisoners in Texas. So telemedicine has become very important. So we have all those elements, we have great science, yet we do not innovate in a way that I would say we can stay relevant. And that comes back to Rob Kaplan's talk and to what Daniel showed us. We need to bring that gap down and make sure, as we discover, we're already connecting to public policy, we're already connected to capital, we're already bringing in people like you from all these different sectors with different agendas and converge them together. And if we are able to do that, what we are then seeing is what we did in COVID without a choice, because we had to, because it was about surviving or not, literally. Within 8 months, we developed a vaccine. We can argue whether it's a great vaccine or not. That's beyond the point. But in 8 months, we brought something forward that went into an arm. And that is the way forward we have to continue to do. And if we do that, we're going to be so very successful. And that's not what typically happens at a university. So we took some of our strength. We took the Brain Health Institute, which is under Dr. Giulio Tagliatella, a wonderful name. He's the director of the Brain Health Institute. This is one of our strengths at UTMB. It's very innovation friendly, and we build an ecosystem of innovation around it. We have now a whole vice president of innovation, a whole structure for essentially spinning out companies, attracting capital. We have created new vehicles, which is called MB Innovation. It's sort of like more for-profit way of investing into technology early. We have tech boards and experts like all of you coming and helping us pick out good innovations and help us understand, are those the ones that can potentially make it? With that in mind, we are also fortunate, and I think that's one of the reasons why I'm here today, is because Texas right now is ready for innovation. We just got a commitment from the Lieutenant Governor of Texas, literally last week, to put $3 billion in champion dementia research and also other neuro and brain conditions in the state of Texas. We have wonderful partners. Rice University has the Baker Institute. Harris Iris, I mentioned him again. I was stimulated by his talk 5 months ago. We were not as much in there. We had the Brain Health Institute, but I was not the one traveling the world being excited about brain health. It was his talk and his slogan that he created, changing the brain economy, because it's bigger than just understanding neuroscience. It's bigger than just developing or even fighting Alzheimer. It's about how we interact with AI and other tools, because if we don't do that better, guess what? AI will destroy us, because we cannot have mental issues in our world, and on top of it, we layer technology such as AI. We got to rethink how we interact with it, because I do think AI is one of the great things that ever happened to us, but we've got to harness the potential, and because of that, we must understand the brain. And we also have here with Congressman Morton Luttrell, for example, we have congressional support for literally all elements of neuros and mental diseases. Now, we have a lot of specific initiatives that we are doing right now, where we create new partnerships between academia, industry, and brain health research. But we are also, obviously, right here in Switzerland, work with top leading institute like the Wyss Center. Erwin Bodensch is the CEO of the Wyss Center, just signed with us, he's Giulio, in Galveston, a collaboration agreement where we take on completely disruptive new projects, where we develop and test devices like exoskeletons or machines that are connected to the brain. But think about it, when I went to medical school, I read a book about neurobionic, and now 25 years later, we're actually doing it. It does take that long, and I don't want to wait that long. So we've got to come together in new ways. And we have other big projects around AI and so forth and so on. And with that, I stop here for a moment because I do want to have a chance to interact with our moderator on some of the questions.
Well, thank you so much. Let's give a round of applause. And feel free to take a seat. By the way, I admire your shoes. People can't see it, and not everyone can see it, but you have excellent Davos fashion accessories.
2003, I bought them in Milan.
Wow.
I think they're Pradas, but that's beyond the point.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Please take a seat. So you know, I haven't been to Texas. I was expecting some booze now, but you're very polite. But you know, when you see something like that, I think any one of us would be very impressed, right? Like, you're seeing all of the parts of the equation that you would expect, right? You're seeing a lot of funding, $3 billion just announced a couple of days ago. I'm sure that's on top of many things that have already happened. You're seeing collaboration, you see a huge network, and you see also the whole chain, let's say, from academic basic research all the way to, I suppose, collaboration with pharmaceutical and biotech companies. So when I see that, I wonder what's the problem?
Well, the problem is that universities are the most siloed organization. So is the health system. There's no other business that is that convoluted. Let's call it a business for a moment, right? You couldn't possibly design it. We have come to be in this convoluted state. So in order for us to really make full use of it, because there is an enormous potential in it, we need to break down the silos. Rob Kaplan talked about it. I heard some of it in Daniel's talk. And I think we all want to do this. I met Lola outside earlier, like 6 hours ago. She wanted to be in here. And that was one of her first things that she said. How can we bring the gap down? How can we work together now? Sort of like what we did in COVID. I founded a company. It's in Cambridge, Boston. I'm not advertising. It's doing well, phase 2. A kidney therapeutics company. It took me 14 years. I mean, it's ridiculous, honestly. And it's doing really well. So no complaints. But I wish I could have done this faster so I can do other things.
But
and
so is it? I mean,
that is what we need to change.
But you know, help me understand this, because you know, from your presentation, I mean, this is the same Jochen Reiser, right? That's answering this question as the one that made the presentation. I mean, like, your presentation made it seem as if, in Texas at least, you had cracked the code. I mean, you showed us a map with all these institutions working together, with government being supportive, and with work with the private sector. So, which Jochen should we trust on this question?
Well, I think you see maybe two versions of me that are coming really close together. I do think it's important that your environment supports innovation. And to have that coming down from the legislator with some level of urgency, right? Because you can also give 300 million and everybody's excited. No, I mean, they're really putting a lot of resources at us. And it gives us, though, a mandate to really work together. And that's why I showed the Texas Medical Center. Because we could run any clinical trial right there. I mean, we have, I don't know how many thousands of patients. We have every condition of a disease right there. Yet that's not happening. So I think what the legislator is trying to do, help us break down those barriers and really work together. And that includes bringing in people from other businesses, capital, mindsets, to the place. Create that level of urgency that we need.
Is that because that 3 billion has those sort of conditionality to it that Rob talked about?
There will be conditions. Some of them is that there's accountability. And Rob talked about, you know, give me another 5, another 3, and that is often a mentality for researchers, because we are not primarily out to actually cure fundamentally the disease. But then you also got to think the other way around. The Nobel Prize in mRNA technology with a researcher from Penn was because of a paper in 1990s where she found essentially the mechanism to stabilize mRNA long enough to have an antibody response. It needed a pandemic to be really relevant, right? And so I think some of this money will come down to fuel new ideas, but a lot of this money will have to be spent with a high degree of accountability so that the investment is actually paying off.
Right. Let me ask you one final question before bringing in our final panelist, and then I suppose all panelists on this beautiful white couch that's still free for you. Which is, you know, you mentioned, I suppose you're overlooking a lot, you know, you said thousands of people across, I suppose, many disciplines. So when it comes to the topic of today, which is brain health, what have been some of the most promising projects that you've seen, and where have been the gaps that you'd like to fill?
Yeah, I'm a nephrologist by training, okay? And while the kidney has a cortex, the brain cortex is honestly more interesting to me. I feel like I'm fitting in the hypothalamus of the brain right now. It is because...
I'm new to the world of medical jokes, so
yeah,
you get
so you could go along with me a little bit. You were almost shocked for a moment, but literally where we're sitting is in the stem of the brain, which is
right.
where all the associations are happening. So, but I'm fascinated by brain health and mental health. And I'll tell you why. Because the reason we have not been able to develop all the drugs we're seeking to develop is we can't locate. Where is anxiety? Where is fear? Where's my depression? We don't know. So we need more science to localize it, because once we grasp it, it's this circus, we can go at it, but for the brain, has not happened. If we understand brain health, all of our employees will be happier. And so it goes hugely into the workforce, has an economic outcome that's very positive. And I love AI, but I'm worried about if the brain health and the mental health of humankind is not ready in full for AI, that AI will actually come really hard down at us. And that's not really a warning, it's more calling. We have no choice. We gotta get this done with some sense of urgency, and so we better start coming together in novel ways, and that's what I'm here for. That's what I'm excited about.
Wow, you're really tempting me to ask you more about that last statement, but I'm going to resist the temptation as well as I can, and we'll bring it up when Daniel joins us again. I wonder if that's going to lead to some interesting interaction. But before we do, Jochen, I want to ask if we can make way for Kara Altimus, who's going to give you a run for the money in terms of the Davos fashion boots. So, who's also the managing director for the Milken Institute Strategic Philanthropy Initiative. Is that right, Kara?
Yeah, I'm going to sit down.
No, I love that you're taking the center stage. This is great.
Well, it's only me.
That's right. So tell us what it is that you do at the Milken Institute, and tell us how that relates back to the topic of today.
It's been so hard not to comment from the sidelines the whole time, and I imagine that's true for everyone in the room. So, as introduced, I'm Kara Altimus, and I lead the within the Milken Institute, the Science Philanthropy Accelerator for Research and Collaboration. So I could just stop there, the name says it. But we're super focused on driving more strategic investment in science, particularly the health sciences, through bringing more collaborative funding, more collaborative research along the way. As we look back over our last 10 years of time with SPARK, which is what we call this initiative within.
This is an acronym, right?
I mean, we're scientists. We can't help ourselves. We can see that the focus on brain research has increased so dramatically over the last 10 years that it makes up more than half of the work that we have advised and helped move money into the field. And dollar amount fuzzy, we know that we have helped private funders move more than $1 billion into brain research across the spectrum.
Wow.
So in all of this, you keep asking everyone, so what's the problem? You're showing me a great campus, you're showing me all this technology, what's the problem? We think so hard about what is the problem and then how do you then use philanthropy, which is a really unique asset class that has different superpowers than many of the other sources of capital that are driving this innovation. How do we use that to solve some of those problems? So I want to highlight a couple that have been said, but maybe in a different light, if that's okay.
Yeah, please, go ahead.
So one of the things that I think has been mentioned, but to maybe just flip it a little bit, is like, is it hopeful? Is there a path forward? Does it matter that we're innovating? And I think in brain health, we saw about 10 years ago a movement towards the brain initiative and a lot of investment in the brain, and we've seen huge movements of government funders and private funders to put dollars in. But so much of the messaging has been basically the brain is the next universe. It's so complicated that we're going to need every possible tool and every possible dollar. And then that gets magnified and translated in different ways in our culture, in our families, in society, so that if someone is experiencing a mental health condition, they say, why bother going to the doctor? It's so complicated, nobody can fix it.
Right.
So we bring stigma and we don't even start the process. Or we've heard from physicians, top neurologists, that their least favorite thing to do is to give an ALS diagnosis. Not because an ALS diagnosis is the worst case scenario, but because there's nothing to tell the patient next. And that it's a level
Because there's no treatment, there's
no treatment, it is complicated to diagnose, it's a diagnosis of last resort. And so, you know, in all of these cases, what you're hearing is kind of a like hopelessness around the brain. That we know it's important, we know it does all these things, we know it's connected, and yet, why go to a doctor? Because they can't help, it's so complicated. Why give someone a diagnosis? There's nothing I can do. And we hear directly from funders, why should I even engage? And so I think,
because they also don't see the pathway towards.
right, what more could I do? And so, you know, I think thing one, it's on all of us to, you know, and Daniel showed it, there's a lot possible, but how do we make those connections to diseases of the brain that people experience? How do we connect across the diseases of the brain that people experience? So I think, you know, that's thing one, and I think there's some really good examples. So we are working with a partner right now on a brain care score and creating a tool that helps individuals understand that dementia is modifiable in 40% of cases, that you can understand your own and make lifestyle changes, and that it's something that you can take some ownership of. So
right.
That, you know, it's like, it's a little piece. It's not the whole piece. There's another 60% of the population.
But so
that's not it.
you're saying this, which I find a very interesting nugget as a newcomer to this space, I suppose. You know, one example you said is that in 40% of cases, you can help somebody with
Dementia.
with dementia.
Yep.
In terms of changing their lifestyle and helping them deal, I suppose, with the disease or the you know, with what do you say?
Right, so to think about it this way, that 40% of cases of dementia could be prevented with changes along the way. So we understand some of those pieces. And so if you roll back the time and you start to share that information in a way that is not hopeless, but is an empowering, then people are able to make the changes, get the help, and move in the right direction. They also become more brain savvy, more brain interested, and more brain hopeful.
Right, and so that's one part of the equation where I suppose it's just through the nature of your work that you do these, you're able to give that kind of advice, which obviously, if it gets more widespread, if people know more people know about it, then that can already be part of the solution. The other side of the equation, I suppose, is that you are actually funding or helping steer funds towards research.
Right.
You said 1 billion towards
brain.
Towards brain. So what's the hope there? When they, that $1 billion is a lot of money, so those people must see some hope.
Yeah, okay, so what I was gonna say that was gonna be slightly controversial is it's not just about the money. That, we're here to say we need to drive innovation and we need to drive investment. And that message, true, suggests that more money equals more solution, more problems solved. And the other way to look at it is more money, more problems, right? Like we've all heard that before. And so what we need to be thinking about is not just driving more investment, but driving better investments. And those investments need to be more connected. We heard some of this up front and all the way through, but how do you actually incentivize collaboration? Is it that you say you must do this, or do you invest in collaboration? Do you think about what are the infrastructure supports needed so that collaboration is able to happen effectively? And that can be additional technologies, that can be platforms, that's the actual ecosystem of how are you investing in people? So I'm not just investing in one researcher, I'm investing in a team of researchers. So
and that's of course the majority of the funds that you're able to steer are organized in that way, I suppose.
Yeah, I'd love to give an example of this. We have a bipolar specific fund. It's an initiative called BD Squared, Breakthrough Discoveries for Thriving with Bipolar Disorder. That's where we get the BD Squared. I love acronyms.
I know.
You can tell.
You're in a great place for that.
Davos?
I don't think there's an acronym yet, George, is there, for the Davos Alzheimer's Club? DAC? Has it really taken off? Is it taken off?
I know. Like mine.
There it is. There we go.
Okay. So in BD Squared, we were struggling with one of these dichotomies of do you invest in basic science or do we invest in helping people now? And we realized that there was no choice. You have to do both. You can't possibly do one or the other and do either one well, because we have so much heterogeneity, so much difference in what care looks like for people with bipolar, that if you were to try to do basic science on that and try to say, what is that experience, you would have too much difference to actually get any meaning out of it. So we have to improve care to do the basic science. These things are interrelated. And so we built a research infrastructure where we have, in each grant, we are actually funding clinicians to provide care and learning, and we are funding researchers to collect data on those participants. We further invested in the actual data infrastructure, so all data can come together, and analytics, because you can't just expect to put data in. So I think some of this, it's just to point out that we have to be thinking about innovation beyond the dollar, and we have to be thinking about innovation in the context of the ecosystem that we're in, and how can we use the capital pool we have. Philanthropy is the one that we get really excited about, and ask, how are we raising the bar in that infrastructure? How are we making more possible?
Excellent. I'm going to ask you one final question. I'm going to ask our panelists to come back, and then I want to open it immediately to our brain trust here to ask some questions as well. My final question for you is, I work a lot with a person called Andre Hoffman, who's a member of the Hoffman family that owns Roche. And he's been a big philanthropist, his family's been a big philanthropist, but he's sort of come back from that. And he said, nowadays, I think it's more about how you make money than how you spend money. I'm going to take that, since you get very excited about philanthropy, that you would naturally not agree with that point of view. But tell us a little bit why it is that in this space, philanthropy is one of the most effective ways to make progress.
It's both, right? Like, we have to expect that innovation that reaches everyone will probably make money. And that's investment, and that is important for scalability. But in brain, in particular, and across the board in brain, we need a lot of work on early innovation and early findings so that we're pushing into that space. And so philanthropy plays a really important role in helping us understand how do we better diagnose, how do we better treat, how do we understand so that we're able to carry that innovation forward. And I think what we should all be looking for and expect is that both of those things are happening, and that we should be pushing innovation scalably where it's ready, and we are going to continue to need investments along the way that are philanthropic, because the science is still early.
Excellent. Thank you, Kara. Thank you, Kara. I'm gonna now ask you to scoot over. You can choose which side, and then Daniel and Jochen, if you want to join us back. I'll immediately open up the questions. I think there's going to be a microphone going around. I see a hand over there and a hand over there. We'll take those two questions first. Go ahead. So just briefly state who you are and what your question is.
Hi. Is this working?
It is now.
I'm Monica Molinar. I'm the co-founder and co-CEO of Alloy Women's Health, a digital platform for women in perimenopause and menopause in the United States. And actually, our Series A was just announced recently in Fortune's Most Powerful Women
Oh, great.
blog. So
I was wondering why you were pointing at me, because... Thank you.
So we appreciated that. Thank you. I've listened to 3 hours of panels now about brain health here today, and haven't heard estrogen mentioned one time, which I think is a miss. Thank you. Sometimes innovation is great, and we are innovating at Alloy by making access and information more available, access to actual medical doctors who are specialized in menopause and the treatment, mainly prescription solutions that work. But we knew from the 40s till 2002 that estrogen was brain protective, cardioprotective, bone protective, all of these things, and then we forgot thanks to an unfortunate NIH-sponsored study, the Women's Health Initiative, that basically told us all that estrogen was dangerous and something to be feared, and it's something that we're engaging with now. But I think it's important that it's a part of the conversation, and I'm wondering how much of it, especially as Alzheimer's patients are 2/3 of Alzheimer's patients are women, and you can prevent Alzheimer's with lifestyle, but also as we age and get older with treating with estrogen and hormone therapy in time. Being from Galveston, I'm sure that you're aware of Mary Claire Haver, a big name in the menopause space right now. So just would love to hear your comments on hormone therapy and how you're thinking about this, and also sometimes how innovation is not the way to go.
Thank you. And I think we're going to take the second question immediately. You've got a microphone. Wonderful. Go ahead.
My name is Renan Ram, and I'm the CEO of Neuraxstem. And I would like to answer that lady's question first.
Wow, this is a very innovative way of doing it. But hold on, so I got to say though, because there's some, there's Davos ways. I'm sorry, like it. So we're gonna ask your question first, and then we'll see if
we already know what has to be done.
Your question.
My question is, first I'm going to say Hoffman is wrong. This lady over Kara is right. I'm a product of philanthropy 15 years ago. Today, we cure just about all the diseases. Philanthropy makes a huge difference.
So, was that a question?
No, the question is, I'm saying, you're trying to answer the difference between Hoffman's approach and philanthropy. I'm just telling you, I'm not asking a question.
Wow, this is amazing. This doesn't often happen to me, that people just tell me. Thank you. But thank you for telling us. Thank you. We're going to take then the question from, what was your name? From Monica. And Jochen, you were addressed with this question, so do you want to take it?
Well, thank you for bringing it to the forefront. Of course, we need to look at women, we need to look at children, we need to look at men. I think one of the challenges we can solve potentially is by getting access to our patient information. So we have within, let's just say UTMB, but that's true for any other major organization, we have so much health data, and we're not going to harness it. Right? So right now we're running our own AI program that actually finds teaching cases. So let's say someone comes in with a heart attack, and it's a straightforward procedure and whatnot, good outcome. AI will find that this patient had a very rare disease 20 years ago and builds the whole case for teaching. And I think if we use AI in a way that we bring women's health more to the forefront, I think that's a strength. The other part I would say, Galveston specific, we are a huge maternal fetal center, which is, we have the highest designation, level 4 designation, so we're very interested in this. But historically, women's health in general has not been looked at, and the same is true for all parts of the world when it comes to how study populations are being assembled. So we need to rethink all of this, and I think AI and breaking down those barriers is a huge new approach. And then finally, I know it's very long, but in medical school, when I was in medical school in the 90s, I started out that you do not give beta blockers in a heart attack. And then 2 years later, I was still in medical school. In my next exam, you had to absolutely give it. And at that point, I learned you can throw everything up in the air. So I would not be disencouraged. I congratulate you for your company and for a potential new approach that you're obviously having. And I think we need to be ready to test all of those new technology in our patients or with the help of AI in our patient collection.
Thank you. Daniel, did you want to answer that question as well?
Quick question, and there's this new sort of understanding that ovarian health impacts women's health and cognitive health. And we didn't touch on my talk, but regenerative medicine, folks like Jennifer Garrison out of the Buck looking at new ways to keep ovarian health longer. So I think there's an interesting blend of regenerative medicine, stem cell biology, and the digital ways to measure when folks are perimenopausal, give them the right digital tools, and potentially the hormonal therapies, and now even diagnostic tools that can pick up from saliva your hormonal levels. So all this super convergence again can apply to women's health from womb to tomb.
Excellent. We've got a question right here and then one right there. Go ahead.
I'm Joshua Haynes. I'm one of the co-founding partners of Masawa. We're the first mental health impact investment fund. And so we're able to use both blended finance, philanthropy, as well as a number of elements in the venture capital stack so that we can invest for both financial and social outcomes. And we have a special focus on the founders themselves and their own mental health that we call nurture capital. For your scientists, for your researchers, for the founders you're investing in, how are you focused on them in that entrepreneurial journey that they're all going through and making sure that they're not burning out and they're not putting the business or the impact or the research at risk?
Excellent. And Kara, I know you're going to answer that question. I'm just going to try to get to the second question next, which is also like a little bit of a brain exercise for you to remember the
I don't
question.
know if you can hear me. Hi, everybody. I'm Seema Kumar. I'm CEO of Cure. It's an innovation campus in New York City. We're looking at transformational innovations, including in brain health. But I first wanted to ask Mr. Moderator's permission to actually
To make another
comment.
statement?
No, but I'm going to answer and comment on the question asked about women's health.
But you know,
I think it's an important piece.
you know what? You know what? We're in Davos, but we're going to break Davos rules. We're going to have a democratic vote about this. So do we want?
Talk about investment since the panelists,
Yeah. So we do. We do want that. Well, you know what, George? I love this. This is not democracy, but it is the voice of God speaking. So yes, this is the top dog. So you know, with you don't have the blessing. You have the blessing of George. You know, our godlike convener.
So, I just want to comment to say, yes, this is actually new insight, and unfortunately, both in terms of the, what hormone replacement therapy does for estrogen, but also NIH, deciding not to include, or before FDA deciding not to include women in clinical trials, what that has caused is a huge data gap. And as an investor, when you look at investing and looking at case for investment, the lack of the data really makes it really difficult to make a compelling investment case. And this is where going back to, this is not philanthropy, but non-dilutive funding from ARPA-H is coming into the fore. And there are many companies, which I was so happy to hear last week at JP Morgan, entrepreneurs who are actually working on this and figuring out, you know, the protective pieces of estrogen as it relates to women's brain health. But a comment also on just brain health in general. In the rare disease arena, there are treatments being developed that are in clinical stages for Alzheimer's disease. Unfortunately, these are gene therapies, and it's a single administration. You could be rid of Alzheimer's or you can delay it, but it's going to cost you $5 million. So I think the pharmacoeconomics of it, as we think about innovation and investment, needs to really be also a focus. So that's just my comment.
Thank
George,
you.
thank you for the work.
Yeah, that was amazing. Great. Kara, you want to react to the?
So I'm going to go back to
Please.
Joshua.
Yeah.
And to first say, huge shout out to the work that Joshua and Masala are doing. We're such fans. And the second piece, which we often talk about as human capital. How do we think about and support the people that are doing the work and doing the innovation? And so we think about this as well. And that's from building the scientific communities, building the communities of clinicians, scientists, people living with the mental health or neurodegenerative conditions that are of note in that. And how do we support them for the exchange of ideas, for rapid learning, for better innovation, and to make sure that they have the mentorship and the environment that they need. And the other thing that I'll kind of put on the table is you were sharing your focus. The other group that we support, because we are helping individuals and foundations with biomedical philanthropy, which I'll take a very quick aside and say people generally don't just walk into the door and say, today I'm investing in Alzheimer's. They experience the loss and the pain of someone who was near to them that experienced Alzheimer's, and it's painful. And that could be true for Alzheimer's, bipolar, FTD, you name it. These are hard. And so the funders themselves also need supporting, because the philanthropy and the investment is still hard, and they want change so fast. And why, of course. But the journey of making a difference and impact is long and hard. And so we also work on supporting funders so that there's more sustainability of funding, more learning across those funders. So just adding to all the different ways that we should be supporting people doing good work.
Thank you. We have time for apparently 2 more questions or comments. Very important. Questions or comments. We'll have one here and one there. Go ahead.
Thanks. Kara, I just wanted to...
But I do want to know your name.
Oh yeah, sorry. My name is Fred Destrobeck. I'm the Executive Director of the European Brain Council. We are a Brussels-based advocacy organization promoting brain research, brain innovation, brain health at the EU level, and then we started collaboration with DAC to launch a global brain coalition and present in New York at the General Assembly of the UN and many other international fora. And the question I wanted to ask you, Kara, echoing also what your peers on the panel are saying, it seems to me there is also an issue with agenda setting and complementarity. And I'd like to hear you about how philanthropic investment is providing a seed investment to encourage public funders. The reason why I'm asking this is, as EBC, we are currently shaping the future European Brain Health Partnership. It's going to be relatively small in terms of quantity, and I was encouraged by your comment about saying it's not the amount of money that matters, but it's how it's invested. And it's exactly tapping into what you said about ecosystem building and ecosystem generation. And what we can already see is how the pain points in collaboration are now moving. It's like the resource issue is now moving into how can we make research more open, how can we create this ecosystem of trust and then bring the private sector into it. But then where does philanthropy fit into that according to you?
Excellent. And you'll get to answer, and then we'll go to you. There we go.
Okay.
Go on.
Okay. I'm going to answer quickly then. I'm so glad you asked this question. I had a whole third bullet in my notebook that it was going long, so I didn't get to, and it was this. And so I think there is a real necessity that we have convenings like this. Thank you, George, and all of the organizers, but also other funder convenings, that we are bringing the cross-sectoral funders together to do agenda setting, agenda sharing, and policy and practice sharing and setting. And so philanthropy, what we see is that there's a real space to innovate, and there's also a real space to use some best practices. And where we've seen good innovation in philanthropy is around like open science sharing. So like we have a grant program right now where we give 1/10 of the money, and we say, that's to get you started, and as soon as we see that you have gone through all the pains inside your institutions to put your data in the data portal, we'll give you all the money. And we do that because we learned that it can take 3 years if you let it take 3 years, or it can take 1 month if you incentivize getting data where it needs to go. And so that's a place that we've been able to use philanthropy to show that there's a new way. And there's other places that philanthropy learns and uses our government and other kinds of funders to say, like, how do we vet science quickly but also rigorously? And philanthropy can do that too.
Excellent. Jegen, I know you want to make final comments.
I don't need to. I mean, but I have a different thought on that.
Okay.
That fits.
Go ahead.
It can not fit too.
No, I just approach it slightly different. So I have found a molecule that's called SUPAR. It's my license plate. If you ever see a car, that's, and I ran AI on it, okay? But really intense, so pages of it. And I found only one mistake. But that mistake, I guarantee, very few people in the world would have found, but it's a critical mistake. If you would have made a decision about the mechanism based on AI only, it would have misguided you, right? And so what I learned from that is we need your expertise, right? I'm a physician scientist by training and a fairly good businessman by now, but I'm not anywhere near, from a legal perspective, oversight, compliance, all that you are good in. And so if we come together and explain to people who want to give money to us that still can result in a for-profit company, and we need to go into a dialogue with each other. And nobody can just give money to us anymore and sort of like dictate the conditions. We want to have our conditions worked out together before we embark in a big journey of innovation together. But I can guarantee you, if we were talking more often like this, we would avoid a lot of mistakes. You would avoid mistakes by having me at some tables, or any of you, and certainly also vice versa. And we got to create an ecosystem, and that's a changing brain economy to some degree. And then great things will happen.
That's amazing. Thank you so much on that comment. A final question or comment from you.
So I'm Rosa San Giorgio. I'm a member of the board of the Women's Brain Health Foundation, and we are advocating to create the first ever research institute for brain health with focus on sex and gender precision medicine, because it doesn't exist. But the question is about that collaboration and that dilemma, philanthropy and investment again. And I want to ask it to Daniel, because I believe, and I don't know, you were so fast, I took some pictures, but I don't
But
remember
you'll get his
many of the
presentation if
names,
you send the code, right? Yeah.
many of the names of your companies, but probably there are some of the innovations that you shared with us that were initially actually funded by philanthropy and then by investment. Because what Robert was mentioning is exactly that. It takes so long that at the beginning you need someone that has actually very long time frame. So my question is, can you give us some examples of some of these innovations that are so cool that we saw on screen that were financed initially by philanthropists that are now very proud of it?
Thank you so much.
I don't know exactly where all the initial funding came from, but many starts as academics. One I know of at Stanford called Wobot, started as an academic project that's sort of a chatbot with AI for folks with depression, and that's now rolled out as a scaled startup. There are folks I think initially funding the Voice as a biomarker that can measure depression, anxiety, and other elements that started with academic and other funding. They're now becoming businesses. The challenge often is that valley of death. It's talked about whether it's a molecule or it's a digital therapeutic. How do you go from ideation to science and translate that to a business model? And I think part of the charge for everybody here is there may be solutions that already exist. You can find them on digital.health. You can become the early adopters. You can bring them to your neurologist, your psychologist, your community, your philanthropists, and then catalyze from small startups or philanthropical situations to ones that can really scale globally.
Thank you. I think this has been wonderful. You know, I think we're almost out of time. George, I don't know if I can put you on the spot in just 30 seconds with some final thoughts from your side. Since I've gotten to know you as the voice of God, so I want to make sure we pay our dues and make sure you can close it out. While, by the way, while we were speaking, the sky appeared above us. Just from my side, I hope that you all enjoyed this. It seemed like you have. I was quite surprised to learn throughout this final part of the conversation that actually this interaction, including the comments, you find is extremely valuable. And I'll just say this from my experience. I worked at the World Economic Forum, George, you know this, for a long time, and I've seen from up close some of the innovations that came out of, in healthcare, from the World Economic Forum and from exactly convenings like these. And so from my side, I just wanted to say, I'm very grateful that we get to spend this time together. I hope you all found that valuable, and just know that there is a rich history of the World Economic Forum where some of the most valuable things that came out of the World Economic Forums have been in this field and with people like yourself. So I hope you feel that this has been worth your while, and I hope that this is not the end, but the start of a journey. And with that, I want to thank you. And George, over to you.
Just a couple of stories. This is DAC, but it's the Davos Alzheimer's Collaborative. And it's the Davos Alzheimer's Collaborative because Klaus Schwab called me about 5 years ago and said, I incubated CEPI and Gavi in the Global Fund. They've done a great job in infectious disease. But I believe Alzheimer's is a global health crisis at the same scale as the infectious disease crisis. So will you help me incubate a global mechanism, patient-led, that will deal with convening? So someone says, who convenes? It's the patients. We want everyone to work together. We want an integrated system that works. But I'm going to tell a story on Mike. I was at a global forum, the global conference in Los Angeles. Big room, 50, 60 people, talking about the American health system and how complicated it is, how disjointed it is, how unconnected it is to a true ecosystem. So he comes into the meeting and he says, you know, during my lifetime, the cost of a long-distance phone call has gone to virtually zero. The cost of doing a financial transaction on the stock market has gone to virtually zero. And he said, during my lifetime, the costs to the health system, 14% pharmaceutical products, 17% just in claims processing with insurance companies and Medicaid. He says we're going the wrong directions. His solution is, forget America. Go to a place that has not have this complicated a health system and start fresh and figure out how to innovate somewhere else and then teach America. So for those of you who will come to future sessions here, you're going to hear what we're doing in Africa. Here is a complicated set of situations where brain health, both of youth and of the Asian population, is front and center, but where they have very little connectivity across all of Africa. So if you get a common data protocol, you put AI on top of it, where you start with somebody who is not as complicated as we are, maybe we can innovate in the south and bring the north as well as the north, bringing something to the south. But I'm going to call you on who is going to invest in the convening process. You probably weren't here when they did this in back of the first panel, but the Brain House is going to go on the road. We're going to do this probably at the World Bank meetings, then we'll do this at G7 in Canada, then we'll do this at UNGA again with our friends at the European Brain Council, and then we're going to take it to South Africa at G20 at the end of the year. And so a continuous convening process where it's a bunch of patients, or at least the patient voice, that says, how are you guys going to work together to get us the solutions to what is a massive problem around the world for families, for people. No one in the system has an incentive, I don't believe, purely to collaborate, but I think patients do. So this will be a continuous convening process. where we don't, quite frankly, we're not the actors, we're not the researchers, we're not governments, we're not industry, we're not investors, but we want all of those pieces of the puzzle to work together. So working with the University of Texas, we're talking about how to do systems transformation. How do you go from what is currently a brain negative world, social and economic, but a brain negative brain economy, to a positive brain economy? So how did the energy industry begin to think about transitioning from a fossil fuel industry to a renewable industry? We can debate about how well they've done, but we're now on COP 30, right? And we're still not there, and indeed we're probably falling behind. But at least we're working together. So how do we begin to do this systems transformation? And then how do you measure what systems have to change from lifelong education to the education system, the research system, how do you fund it, and how do you connect it better at the funding sources? So there's a whole series of systems that have to change. And then how do you get indicators of whether you make progress on those changes? And how do you have a continuous convening process that brings those players together to identify the systems, to count on the indicators that you need, so that you know you're making progress. This is big, but I will tell you, the brain brings us all together. Everything from love and disease, same place. And boy, we ought to lean on the former and not the latter, and figure out how we can connect these dots on a continuous basis. So this has been an extraordinary panel. While there's hopelessness, there's hope. You know, hope and hopelessness was sitting side by side here. And so how do we take the hope and conquer that feeling of hopelessness that the clinicians have felt? I want to thank you all for coming. We have 4 more sessions this week, 2 tomorrow and 2 the next day. And you're invited all to come because we want this community to be part of this process because we can't do it alone. We need all of you, and I appreciate you all coming, commenting, and asking questions. And to this panel, thank you for your time, your intellect, your energy, your devotion to what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Great. Thank you. Thanks.
Nice to meet you.